Good day, ladies and gentlemen. You have tuned in to Point Counterpoint with Charlie, that's me, and Pastor Gary, sitting over there. We will be discussing current events, political issues, always from a religious point of view. It's brought to you by WHRFM.com. And if you'd like to donate to the Dare to Be Different Food Pantry, which funds the show and helps funding WHRFM.com, as well as supplying food to the needy in our community, please go to WHRFM.com, hit the donate button, and give us anything that you could possibly spare. We would appreciate it. If you have a question or concern, give us a call at 848-480-6371. Today, I'm going to discuss riot control. And as a sub-subject,
I just realized I put RIOT CONTROL.
Yes. It should be. Wait a minute, folks. Hold on.
Hold on. There we go. RIOT CONTROL. There we go. I guess it could be a contrail.
Folks, we could use a donation to get somebody that can spell. In all honesty, I mean, poor Gary, his trousers have buttons because the zipper's too complicated for him. We need help here.
Yeah,
We really do.
Contrail.
Yes.
Well, you know, those contrails aren't good for us either.
No, that's true. So we're going to talk about riot control. But it also has to do with federalization of law enforcement. Mm-hmm. That's the underlying goal of the political hacks that are in power today, is the federalization of law enforcement. Now, just because you change presidents and change parties doesn't mean the political hacks aren't still there. Mm-hmm. Obama established a civil rights division, and they were going out into the community and investigating police departments, filing charges against police departments, forcing police departments to sign consent decrees so that the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division now runs their police department. I believe they've got over 37 consent decrees. Rush Limbaugh mentioned this, either 137 or 37 consent decrees of some of the major cities, which means that the police departments are now being run by the federal government. And you've seen in Portland and Philadelphia and Washington and Baltimore and all of these cities, in Chicago, where Black Lives Matter and Antifa have destroyed the city. And the police department has proven to be ineffective. Ladies and gentlemen, the police departments are ineffective, but the police departments are being hamstrung by the political apparatus that control them. The mayors and the chiefs of police who have a left-wing, secular, progressive, liberal point of view. And now let me just take you back to 1968. In 1968, we had a police commissioner in Philadelphia. I worked in Philadelphia for 20 years. I have close to 30 years in law enforcement, and the commissioner and the mayor was Frank RIZZO. He was a heck of a guy to work for. He was the opposite of what a politician should be. Or he was what a politician should be, which is opposite of what they really are. Mm-hmm. The prime example I use is usually the politician, the chief of police, the boss will say this: when you're right, we're behind you 100%. Mm-hmm. When you're wrong, you're on your own. RIZZO, his philosophy, I believe, he never said it, I'm saying it, was, when you are right, you don't need me. Mm-hmm. When you're wrong, I'm behind you 100%. Mm-hmm. If you were doing your job, if you made a mistake, he was there. He was there. He was there to support you. But let's talk about riots. Let's talk about civil disobedience. Let's talk about police departments in action and what the effect is if you have a strong, they talk about militarization of the police. A police department is a quasi-military organization, just by definition. Mm-hmm. So the militarization of police is just a catchphrase. It is a quasi-military organization. They wear uniforms. They have policies and procedures and directives they must follow. They stand in formations to be inspected. They march. They learn close order drill. They learn to obey commands, and they practice quelling riots and civil disobedience. That's part of their job. And you can't do it one mob versus another mob. Now, that's what you folks have been seeing on the television. You've been seeing police mobs fighting with Black Lives Matter and Antifa mobs. It's the only way you can tell the difference between the mobs is the policemen have different uniforms and usually have, and you can't even say they have sticks and shields because BLM and Antifa have sticks and shields too. So the only way you can tell they're the police is because maybe they have tear gas guns and they have sidearms. It's just mob against mob, and it's very ineffective when they're even allowed to engage.
Well, don't forget, Obama came up with, I guess, 2012 with his plan to have a civilian national security force. Remember that?
Yeah,
he was pushing it.
Well, they haven't stopped.
Yeah, so they want a civilian security force.
Well, they want to take over police departments.
Right.
They're eventually going, if you leave them in power long enough, they're eventually going to claim. Now, see, Trump was in for 4 years, but he came in. The easiest way for me to describe the Trump presidency was he was a head and a brain with no arms and legs. He came in on a national ticket. He didn't come in through local, state, regional elections.
So in other words, he didn't have any support.
He didn't have people.
Right.
And he gets to Washington. Now he's got to appoint people who are supposedly conservatives from the Washington establishment. Where if he had started as a local and started coming up through, he would have tentacles, he would have knowledge of people in different areas that were actually conservative as opposed to rhinos, Republicans in name only, or people who espouse conservatism while voting for liberal issues, which is something that Toomey does. And they got some guy in Texas, he's a Republican. He's working on a House bill now to have background checks. So even though Trump came in, my theory is the day he was elected president, he should have put a hiring freeze on. No one gets hired in the entire federal government. And anybody that was hired in the last 8 years gets laid off. Folks, it wouldn't hurt anything. You've seen in the past when
it would probably save money.
Of course it would save money. When the federal government shuts down, it doesn't affect anybody. No. And the thing that galls me is when the federal government shuts down, they go home, they sit on their butts and watch television or take a vacation, and when they come back, they get back pay. They don't lose any money.
Right.
If you go out on strike, if you're working for the Teamsters or the AFL-CIO and you go out on strike, you very rarely get back pay when you come back.
No.
You've lost that. But not if you work for government. You get paid. So anyway, the people that were involved in this during the Obama administration, they just hunkered down, that's all. They just got back down in their foxholes and pulled the cover over and waited for Trump to be defeated. And maybe it was inevitable because I don't think he lost the election. I think he was defeated. That's different than losing the election. In addition, even if he did lose the election, ladies and gentlemen, he had 75 million people voted for him. More people than voted for George Bush, who only had 61 million people vote for him. So, I mean, if you think about it, the loser, even if it was legitimate, which it was not, the loser lost in a landslide. He got a landslide of votes. But so now these people in the Obama Justice Department, they just hunkered down so Trump couldn't cut their heads off and waited for him to leave so that they could continue trying to take over local police departments and federalize law enforcement.
And that's what they're working on now.
Yes. So let me just, here's some comments that Frank RIZZO, the police commissioner of the city of Philadelphia in 1964. We had riots in Philadelphia in 1964, and we had riots in Philadelphia in 1968. And how effective were they? Well, let me see here. Commissioner Rizzo used to be called the general. All right. He was a very imposing commissioner, a very imposing mayor.
Right.
The general was there on Columbia Avenue. The riots were in North Philadelphia, and Columbia Avenue was in North Philadelphia. The general was there on Columbia Avenue in 1964 riots, as well as in 1968 disturbance. No need for the PSP, the Pennsylvania State Police, or the National Guard. 700 plus arrests was over in 3 days.
Wow.
Rizzo's.
This is 64.
This is 1964 and 1968. 1964 we had, it was
Right.
longer. 1968, 700 arrests, and it was over in 3 days.
Okay.
Quote, any big city that doesn't have enough manpower to move in fast in numbers is in real trouble. Of course, if you move in and just stand there, the numbers do you no good. Tell the crowd to disperse, give them fair warning, but if they don't obey, they should be taken on immediately. The man to go after is the one that shouts burn or loot. He has to be taken on and taken on good and put right in short pants. Still quoting, there's no place in our form of government for a riot, for insurrection, for anarchy. Nobody's going to loot a city here. Nobody's going to sack a city. That's my promise. There will be no backing off of police here. Force will be used. The real troublemakers cannot be satisfied. They just take attempts to meet their demands as a form of weakness. Do you hear that, folks? They just take attempts to meet their demands as a form of weakness. You have to meet them with absolute force. All I can say is that the first bottle thrown, the first brick thrown, the first Molotov cocktail, the first time police are fired on, force will be met with force. And I'm tired of hearing this, just a little bit more force. If they fire on us, I assure you we won't use the least amount of force we have. To use force just as the Army does, it's war. But I don't think we will ever need federal troops. We're becoming familiar with guerrilla tactics, and we have the weapons to fight a war. I consider myself an expert in city warfare, and I don't know of any problem we can't handle. We may have a riot here, but it will be the shortest riot in history. That was quotes from Frank Rizzo, Philadelphia Police Department. He was quoted in Esquire in March of 1968. The general also said, one of our SWAT trucks could take on Cuba.
Wow.
Now, that was the philosophy. There were other cities around the country that were burned to the ground. Detroit was one of them. Philadelphia was not.
Wow.
In 1964, the riots lasted for several weeks, but it was contained in a specific area. And 1968, they started, and Rizzo put them down immediately. Just to give you an idea, he was, at the time, looking for equipment to transport officers to the scene of civil disturbance en masse. So here was the first police bus.
Oh, wow.
That's the first police bus.
Okay.
And that's Commissioner and Mayor Rizzo. Here was a later police bus. I happened to be the commander of one of these at one point when I was at the police academy. You see the bubblegum machines on the top?
Oh, wow.
They had kind of interesting. They had special bullet-resistant glass mounted over the windows, which I thought was really kind of ludicrous because the body of the bus is just thin aluminum. So,
Well, I mean, if you're gonna attack the bus, you would shoot at the windows.
Well, whoa. What makes you think that the people who are going to attack are stupid? It's all bulletproof windows, but the side of the bus isn't bulletproof. Now, if I want to protect myself, what I'd have to do is jump up on the back of a seat and sit on the top of the seat so I'd be behind the window. So sometimes they make some silly, stupid mistakes and do some silly things.
Now, in '64 in Philadelphia, what was the riot for?
In 1964, civil rights.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the rioting occurred in a black community, and
the same for '68.
Same in '68. And the unfortunate thing is, ladies and gentlemen, that the riots start in black communities and they end in black communities, or at least they did. Mm-hmm. And it was always the black communities that suffered. Mm-hmm. Their stores, their homes were decimated, and it was always so very sad. Mm-hmm. And that was out in California the same way, Oakland and these other places. So today we now have police departments that are standing aside and allowing rioters to dictate the terms. The disrespect for police. When I was a police officer back in 1965, when I pulled up on a street corner and there was a group of youths standing on the street corner, and I said to them, leave. It is now time. We've got a call. We've got calls that you are too loud. You're causing a disturbance. It's time to leave. Mm-hmm. 99 times out of 100, they left. Mm-hmm. The reason they left is because my gang was tougher than their gang. And if they didn't leave, I called my gang. Mm-hmm. And my gang then cleaned the corner. And people got arrested. The mantra has always been, if you put your hands on them, lock them up. Mm-hmm. If you have to put your hands on them, if you have to use force on them, lock them up. Mm-hmm. So I call, I got a disturbance here, they're not leaving, give me an assist officer. I get everybody, including the kitchen sink. When the guys get out of the cars, you're leaving. If the officers have to put their hands on you, if they have to use their sticks on you, you're getting locked up. There is nothing about, well, I'm going to hit you with a stick, I'm going to push you, I'm going to punch you, and you're going to run away. No. That is the rule. I put my hands on you, you're arrested. Mm-hmm. Flat out. You see the videos today. The other thing you see in the videos today is no organization of the police.
Do you think that's on purpose, or?
It's two things. It's on purpose.
Or they're just being told?
No. It's on purpose, but for two reasons.
Okay.
One, it's on purpose because it's the political hierarchy that's controlling the departments now, including the chiefs of police.
All right.
But two, it's on purpose because I don't think they know any better. They haven't been training for civil disobedience for 20 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
There hasn't been any market, not until Obama started it. Mm-hmm. Not until he started it. When he got elected, that college professor up in New England who the police arrested because he wouldn't tell the police what his name was when he lived in the house. Mm-hmm. Neighbors called. The guy was living in this house, or he rented the house. Neighbors called and said, we don't recognize this guy. Who is he? And the police went and said that there's been calls. Who are you? Mm-hmm. Are you entitled to be in this house? Well, now you see these videos. Are you investigating a crime? You have to be investigating a crime before you can ask me who I am. Well, as a matter of fact, I am investigating a crime.
Well, you don't remember the professor's name? That was a big deal.
Yeah, it was a big deal.
And,
you don't remember the crime. Well, what crime could you possibly be investigating? Well, the crime I could possibly be investigating would be burglary, theft, trespassing, mm-hmm. illegal entrance. Yeah, these are all the crimes that I'm investigating because somebody called and said they saw you in this house and they didn't recognize you as being a legal resident of this house. So I think I have justified reasons to ask you, who are you and do you live here? Well, you're doing this just because I'm black. Well, you happen to be black, but that's not why I'm doing it. I didn't ride down the street and say, "Oh, there's a black guy in the doorway. Let's stop him." I am talking to you because someone called. The end result of that was Obama's having beers with the professor and the sergeant on the White House lawn, trying to solve this racial problem. There was no racial problem there. It was invented. And things just seemed to go downhill from there. But in the 20 years prior to this, there were no civil disobedient riots. So police departments, the reason there were no civil disobedient riots was because there is no systemic racism in this country. There's been effective legislation that eliminated it, particularly the Democratic Jim Crow down south type. There used to be redlining legislation, or there used to be redlining. Certain neighborhoods were off limits. Banks wouldn't give mortgages to black people in certain neighborhoods. That's gone. That was eliminated by Republicans, not Democrats. The Jim Crow laws down south that prevented people from voting. Democrats voted them in, Republicans voted them out. The civil rights legislation, Democrats voted against it, Republicans voted for it. So now we have the reasons for demonstrations, the reasons for Martin Luther King and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference picketing in Alabama and speeches all over the country. Those reasons no longer exist. Sure, they were in the past, but it was all Democrats who were opposed to them. Why did black people become Democrats? Because the Democrats said, become a Democrat and we'll give you stuff.
By the way, the big thing that happened back in 2009.
Yeah.
Obama criticized the arrest of the Harvard professor. He accused the police of acting stupidly. Remember that?
Yeah.
He got involved in that.
He got involved, yeah. So that was pretty much, and then they did the civil rights thing, and then Ferguson came along with the hands up, don't shoot thing, and the civil rights division got the Ferguson Police Department to sign a consent decree, and then they've been doing it all around the country. And what they've done is they've manufactured a racial problem. They have manufactured something that doesn't exist.
Right.
You cannot say the systemic racism. Prove it. Show it to me. Systemic means it covers the whole country. Show me something. Nothing. You can't prevent anybody from any type of ethnicity from having any type of a job or getting a mortgage any place or doing anything they want or going anything place they want to go. You just can't do that. Right? Interestingly enough, there are quotas in this country that are racist. If you have a quota, that's racism. Period. Simple as that. Now their colleges are acting in a racist manner against people who excel. Orientals, people from India, they have a different type of work ethic. They're more family oriented with a different type of work ethic. They score higher on the tests. They study. They work harder at the academics. And the colleges restrict the amount of Indians and Orientals that can register.
Wow.
That's racist.
Yeah.
Anyway, the police departments have not had to engage in any civil unrest of any great degree for a long period of time and have not trained their people. And that's a major problem. There's no training. If you see a mob of uniformed cops coming out of a building and a mob of uniformed cops going after the mob of rioters, there's no reason to leave. That's all I see is one mob fighting another mob. That's not the way you handle these demonstrations. That's not the way you handle these riots. It's not the way you handle insurrection. And it's interesting, the word insurrection. The Democrats and the liberals and the media have been using insurrection to talk about January 6th. Mm-hmm. That's a lie. January 6th was a mostly peaceful demonstration, and some people broke the law. Trespassing. A Capitol police officer shot an unarmed demonstrator unlawfully. Unlawfully.
And still we don't know the officer's name.
There is absolutely no justification under the law. Federal, District of Columbia, state, no state would allow that officer to shoot that person under those conditions. There's no special law protecting congressmen and senators from being accosted by voters. Trespassing's trespassing. It doesn't make any difference. They were trespassing on the Capitol, the seat of government. It's just trespassing. They destroyed the doorway. Getting in, that's just damage to private property. That's not burglary. That's not robbery. They did nothing to warrant being blown away by that guy with that Glock. But the thing is, the police have no organization. They have no ability to effectively apply force the way it's supposed to be applied in a riotous situation because they haven't been trained for it. No money's been allocated for it, and the political structure that controls them refuses to allow them to act the way they should.
So now the Philadelphia, not to get you off the subject, in the 60s had control of riots. Whatever happened, is Philadelphia the same way today?
All right, let me explain something. At one point, when I was a sergeant, I was assigned to the police academy. And we used to have 2 officers from every district on every shift come to the academy for in-service training.
Okay.
And one of the in-service training classes was riot control.
Okay. All right.
And what was riot control? There was 22 districts, 2 men from every district. That's 44 men. That's a platoon. What was the training? Everybody out onto the tarmac, fall in. Fall in, a military formation. Well, interestingly enough, when I was in the police department, a good percentage of officers had military training. That's not true today. So,
because what we've seen in Philadelphia in the last year doesn't seem like they've been too much.
No training at all. No
control.
There's no control. No, it's just one
And
group of
Philadelphia
one
burns.
mob in uniform with another mob. And actually, both mobs have uniforms. These are police uniforms, and this uniform is black with helmets and black and backpacks and sticks. So, what would be the fall in? Attention, dress right, dress. Left face, forward march. Close order drill. Uniformity. What's close order drill? What's teaching people how to march? It is being able to move a large body of men or women from point A to point B together uniformly and get them there all together in one place doing what they're told to do. Does the police departments today around the country do this? No. And if you were to see a video now of, say, Portland, and the doors of the police station opened, and 44 police officers were to come out on the double and fall in, and the sergeant would come out and say, attention, just right dress, ready front, attention to orders. Read the order of the day. This is what we're going to do. Now we're going to march down to where the demonstration is, and we're going to form into a wedge formation, and we're going to do such and such. We're going to take control of that intersection. And there are commands to use, but you can't just do it out of the air. There has to be training. So it's left face, forward march. Hoop, 2, 3, 4, left, 2, 3, 4. You march down there. Platoon, halt. First squad, forward march, column left. Third squad. See, because people don't even understand that. What do? They fell in 3 squads, 1, 2, and 3. All right? So the first squad takes over, you send them over here. The third squad, you send them over here. The middle squad, you form them into a wedge formation. Now you advance. You don't just walk up. You have shields, you have batons, and you advance in a military way, step by step. Step, step, step. You approach the crowd. Now you start to move them. Step, step, and you're using your stick and your shield, and it's in a military formation. You also have people, supervisors and observers, who are looking to see who the organizers are. Remember, I read you the thing, and it said, Rizzo said, find out who's yelling loot. Find out who's yelling steal. Find out who's yelling. You look for the organizers. And then you have a flying squad. You identify an organizer and you go get him. You break in and you go get him. You secure him. You pull him back within your lines and you arrest him. You arrest him for riot.
So as long as our cities continue to have no riot control, the people will clamor for the federal government to come save them and to take over the police department.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we conclude this episode of Point Counterpoint with Charlie and Pastor Gary. You have a pleasant day. Give us a call, 484-480-6371. Go to WHRFM.com and donate to Dare to Be Different Food Pantry. Ladies and gentlemen, keep your back to the wall and your paddle dry.